In Blender, photorealism is this chain. Yes, there are only 3 links on it, and that's because there are just 3 things you need to master it. It seems simple, right? The sad thing though is that you already know what these links are, but you haven't been using them correctly, and a weak chain just won't hold anything. So what are these links and how do you utilize them? Today you'll learn that and more. Let's dive in. Whether you're a pro at modeling or have barely touched it, the first link in the chain is just that, modeling. But instead of a link, I like to think of it as the metal the whole chain is made out of. If that metal is strong, the whole chain will be stronger, but if that metal is weak, the whole chain will be weaker. A bad model can ruin everything you do later on. So how can you make that metal strong? How can you make a good model? The answer is by modeling cleanly and concisely. But how do you do that? When you're modeling, try to be smart in the changes you make. Every time you make a loop cut, extrude a face, move something, merge some vertices, or make any operation, try to think of how it could limit you later on. Ultimately, you should have an object that's easy to change and alter at all times. Luckily, Blender has a built-in feature to help with this, modifiers. Modifiers make changes to your object that would normally make it hard to alter and form. Let me use these 2 vases as an example. They look the same, but the right one is using the subdivision surface modifier. As you can see, when I tap into edit mode on them, one would be really hard to change, but for the other vase, adjustments are easy and smooth. This shows the power of modifiers. But before I bore you with modeling, let's move on. The second link is probably what most people frequently associate with photorealism, materials. And if your materials look something like this, pay attention because you can transform them, making them more realistic and believable. The key to these photorealistic materials is what's called a PBR material. PBR materials not only simulate color, but also roughness, opacity, and even ridges and crevices. To make one, you need a set of images that are matched with each other. If you want to follow along, head over to polyhaven.com, the link is in the description for that, go to textures, and download some with this button. Now to put them on your object, head back to Blender and enable the Node Wrangler add-on. Here's the easy part. Select your principled BSDF node, go under Node Wrangler, and hit Add Principled Setup. When you do this, the images you've downloaded are directly translated onto your object in channels like roughness and color. If some of your textures are stretched, go up here to UV and find Cube Projection. This option usually works the best, but if your object is shaped like a cylinder or a sphere, use the corresponding projections. And if you want to learn more about how PBR materials work and why, watch my other video on photorealism. It's always good to understand why something works in Blender, not just how to do it. Next, the third link is lighting. Lighting can make the difference between something like this and something like this. In Blender there are 2 types of scenes, those that use individual lights and those that use HDRIs. You've probably heard me talk about HDRIs in my other videos, but to say it again if you haven't, they're these 360-degree view images that get wrapped around your scene and provide lighting that's variable and more like real life. To learn more, watch my video on lighting. For scenes that use light objects, there are only 2 things I recommend doing. First, watching my lighting video again for a better understanding of it, and using light temperature. If you're rendering in cycles, select your light and go to the shading tab. Here, click Use Nodes and you should see an emission shader. Attach a black body node to its color and it should turn orange. In short, color temperature and lighting is how warm or cool a light is. If it's warmer, it's more yellow, and if it's cooler, it's more blue. By default, Blender makes your light very warm when you connect the black body, so increase it to somewhere around 8000 for a cooler appearance. And finally, I think this last thing also falls under lighting. Under your render settings, there's this little button that says View Transform at the bottom under Color Management. And in that button it says Filmic. If you want to change it to some of the other options, you'll notice that some of the colors of your scene change. There's one option in particular, Filmic Log, that makes your scene look washed out. But if you select it and adjust the exposure and gamma values, your scene should go from this to this. I also recommend turning the strength values of your lights to somewhere in the hundreds, and if you're using an HDRI, changing the strength to 1000. I think it provides better results, but it's a personal preference. And now it looks like you've made it to the end. You've probably just clicked a bunch of buttons in Blender, so why not click that subscribe button right down there real fast? Maybe the like button too? But anyway, see you next time.